Can you tell me why the price of food is going way up? My daughter has 5 children, and they're reduced to eating noodles and rice and trying to stretch the budget. And I thought through phase 1 and 2, the prices would be frozen, but they are not. They are still going up.
I don't like the present wage price formula. It's not working. It's loaded against the side of working people, and it's not protecting consumers.
The Secretary of Agriculture said we should eat fish, but fish is $1.79 a pound. That doesn't help very much.
The wage and price control program under Nixon is a very lopsided operation in which they've been fairly effective in holding down the income of working people and freezing the wages, but the price control part of it's been a disastrous failure, and you're reminded of that every time you go to a supermarket.
Most of us feel that our property taxes are awfully high, and we'd really like to know what you have in mind to provide some relief.
The ordinary family can hardly own their own home anymore, or their own business, or their own farm. I talked to a woman at Kenosha, Wisconsin during the primary election last spring. As I recall it, she was paying more than a third of her entire income to support the property tax on the little house that she lived in. She had an income of about $1,700 a year, and the property tax on her house was $570 a year.
If ever we get up enough for a down payment, I don't know if we could pay the property taxes, we'll be ready to retire.
The only way I can see to reduce that load is for the federal government to move in and pick up a heavier share of the services that the states and cities are now carrying. The great injustice in the tax laws are in these loopholes that permit some of the richest people to pay little or no taxes at all, and that's not right. That money is one source of money that you could use to take some of the pressure off the middle-income taxpayer.
I'm a working man, and I work 40 hours a week just like everybody else. And it seems like if I get a Saturday, get a little overtime, let's say I get $70, $75. You know, exactly half of that overtime goes to taxes. I am really working for nothing.
You ever ask yourself where that tax dollar goes? We used to run the United States government back in the days of Franklin Roosevelt on about $10 billion a year. We've spent $150 billion on Vietnam alone. We're spending $80 billion on the Pentagon every year. The president wants another $4 billion added on this year, beyond what we were spending last year on military operations. I think you ought to ask yourself where that tax dollar's going.
My nephew was killed over in Vietnam about 2 years ago. Yeah. Now I understand we're going to go to Russia now and help develop their country. And the Chinese are worried about you getting in. They don't want you to get in. They want Nixon to stay in power here yet. Why? If we were fighting communism, why should he stay in business?
Now, personally, I think it was a good thing the president went to Peking. Right. I think it's a good thing we're trying to improve our relations with Russia. But why do we say that 15 million people in North Vietnam are a greater threat to the United States because they're communists than 800 million people in China or 300 million in Russia? This is the thing that doesn't make sense.
I voted for Nixon in '68. I never voted for a Republican before until he come along and says he's going to stop this war, which he didn't. Now, all of a sudden, he's stopping it.
Well, do you know who you're going to vote for this year?
George
McGovern, Democrat, for the people. The people are paying for this campaign with their hard-earned dollars. Send what you can to McGovern for President, Washington, D.C.
We have a plant here that builds typewriter parts. Now this large manufacturer of typewriters has put a plant in Mexico, and they're hiring women for $3 a day, $15 a week, turning out the same parts that our American people are being laid off here in Menominee Falls.
Incredible as it sounds, they get a tax break that's more favorable to them investing overseas than they do investing here at home. We need to encourage surplus capital to invest here. I think this one of the big prices we've paid for this $80 billion defense establishment of ours is that we're funneling our best research and development brains into making sure we have the best tanks and the best missiles and the best aircraft carriers. Meanwhile, the Japanese, who only spend 1% of their gross national product on national defense, are investing their best brains in developing new industrial products that are very competitive. That's another reason to cut back on the numbers of people and resources we're funneling into the Pentagon and begin even subsidizing development of research and new techniques and new plants and new ways of production so that we can get back into competition with the Germans and the Japanese.
And this is in no way fair. Talk fair, well, business, they say, well, business isn't fair. You're supposed to take care of yourself. Where is something going to happen to our particular type of a business? And I believe you have a lot of small businessmen who are holding this all in and not bringing it out. The conglomerate is the one that's going to take over.
There has been a steady concentration of more and more economic power in the hands of fewer and fewer conglomerates. That's really what the ITT case was all about. You had a clear case developed in the antitrust division of the Department of Justice. And yet, because of various political pressures, that merger was allowed to go through, and every day, smaller, moderate, independent-sized businesses are being gobbled up by the conglomerates. So I think what is needed is a new commitment and maybe a louder outcry demanding that antitrust actions be enforced and that the independent businessman be protected. That's really the purpose of antitrust legislation.
You talk about tax loopholes. Can you specify what some of those loopholes are?
Well, I certainly think we ought to repeal those accelerated depreciation increases that were added last year. You really can't justify that. That's really a bonanza. Also, on the oil depletion and mineral depletion allowances, I think we've carried that too far. Some of the other tax shelters benefit very high-income people at the expense of people in the middle. And I really think that the people in this room are probably paying a heavier tax burden because we have too many loopholes in the law at the top. I paid a third of my income in taxes last year. I'm not complaining about it. I published it so that people would know where my income derived from and also how I spent it. And I don't mind paying a third of my income in federal taxes until I read where somebody who's making 10 times as much as I am paid nothing. And that's what infuriates a lot of these working people that I see in the factories and the shops around this country. They read reports where multimillionaires are paying at 5 or 6% rate, and they're paying at a 14 to 20% rate as working people. And that's what disturbs a lot of people.
Senator, is that what's called fuzzy on economics?
It may be, but it's what I believe.
It's been great.
McGovern, Democrat, for the people. The people are paying for this campaign with their hard-earned dollars. Send what you can to McGovern for President, Washington, D.C.